Hi, boys and girls. Miss Leaphart here. Back with our chapter book. If you're just now joining us or you haven't been back to look at the other videos, if you just go to YouTube and you search for Mrs. Leaphart chapter books, all of the chapters that we've been reading are on there. So we're on chapter 5. There should already be 5 videos because the first one's kind of like a prelude, like tells you a little bit about what we're doing and why we're reading it. You don't have to read it to start, but the chapters are labeled. So we are reading Gordon Corman, The Hypnotist. We haven't gotten very far. We haven't learned a whole lot. We just know that our guy in our book here, it's been a few days since Thursday since we've read. So Jax is our actual guy that we're reading about. He's the one that his eyes change color and sometimes he sees himself like from across the room, so from somebody else's point of view, and they're not really sure why. So we're going to talk about going to chapter 5, and we'll read that chapter today. It says, Roaring, New York vaudeville in the 20s was being held at the refurbished theater on the Upper West Side. It was part of a variety show and part museum exhibit. Every effort was made to recreate New York City of the 1920s, from a vintage Schwantz Bearcat parked by the entrance to the bouncing ragtime piano and the 5-cent ice cream cone sold at the concession stand. The ushers, dressed in ornate uniforms, expressed bewilderment over smartphones, iPods, and even plastic water bottles. A few devices had to be confiscated as the 7th graders vied to show off the staff the most mind-blowing and/or offensive app. They seemed to forget that the employees weren't from the past any more than the students themselves were, and probably had cell phones of their own under the gold braiding and shining under their costumes. So they're at an exhibit, the 7th grade class. They're at an exhibit in this old theater. And at this exhibit, they're supposed to be all like looking like they're in the 1920s. So there's people there in costume, dressed like they're from the 1920s. So that's kind of what they're talking about in that. Eventually, everyone settled down and the show could begin. There were singers, tap dancers, and jugglers. The comedian was completely unfunny, but that might have been on purpose, to show what humor was like in the 20s. The boos and catcalls got so loud that the teachers were circulating up and down the aisles, dispensing whispered warnings. But then the hapless performer was pulled off the stage by a hooked cane, and it became clear that it was all part of the show. After a short, silent newsreel about the election of Calvin Coolidge, the appointment of J. Edgar Hoover as head of the FBI, and the first Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, the master of ceremonies introduced the amazing Romallo, who was going to dazzle you with his astonishing powers of the mind. Romallo turned out to be a hypnotist with a swinging gold pocket watch that gleamed in the footlights. When he asked for volunteers from the audience, the 7th graders became very quiet. No one believed he had any special powers, but just in case, it was better to let someone else's mind be tampered with first. Finally, Mrs. Baker, who taught pre-algebra, came forward. It took the amazing Romallo and his pocket watch just a few minutes to put the teacher into a deep trance. She stood there, eyes shut, waiting for instructions. "You are attending a royal ball," the hypnotist intoned. "Your gown is pure white and glitters like diamonds. The Archduke himself asks you to dance. The music has your feet already moving, and you twirl around the floor in a graceful waltz. Now dance, young lady. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. To everyone's astonishment, their math teacher began to waltz across the stage, arms clinging to an imaginary partner. Tommy elbowed Jax, and hard enough to break his ribs. "That's messed up." Suddenly, his hand waved in the air. "I've got to get in on this. There's no way that guy can make me dance with myself." "Don't do it," Jax advised. "All he wants is to turn you into a clown." Mrs. Baker continued to circle the dance floor, her expression blissful. Now, Romallo had more volunteers than he knew what to do with. He woke Miss Baker and selected 6 students from the group clamoring to get on stage. Tommy let out a whoop when he was chosen. "Watch and learn, Opus. I'm going to be a star." Jack settled back in his seat with a sigh of resignation. There was no stopping Tommy when his mind was set on something. Soon, Romallo and had his volunteers in trances and was demonstrating his power over them. Now, they start naming students. I'm going to say them the best I can. I'm not good with names, kids. Not good with names. Calatha Marcus was sweeping the stage with a non-existent broom. Rupert Jones was reciting Mary Had a Little Lamb with passionate expressions. Jessica Cruz truly believed she was in a class where she was the only one who knew the answer to a difficult question. She wiggled in her chair and raised, waving madly, muttering, "Oh, oh, oh, pick me, pick me." The audience ate it up, clapping and cheering and calling out the occasional, "Don't pick her, Teach, make her wait." Then it was Tommy's turn. Maybe it was the boy's overeager, slightly goofy face or how hard he fought to get on stage. Whatever the reason, the hypnotist decided to get a little creative with his final victim. Fluffy feathers cover your entire body, and you strut around the pen, pecking the dirt for stray seeds and small bugs. You are a chicken, a rooster in fact, and the coop is your castle, the barnyard is your domain. With a cock-a-doodle-doo, Tommy was off in a crouch, waddling around the stage, arms hooked to form flapping wings, chuckling heartily. Thanks to his flexibility from basketball training, he was able to get his beak almost all the way to the floor as he foraged for food. Waves of laughter swept across the room. Even Jack smiled a little. "Well, I warned him," he thought. "Look out, Rooster," taunted Romallo. "The farmer's coming, and he has his axe." Tommy reacted with terror, flapping around the stage at high speed, knocking over Jessica in her chair. It got screams. One by one, the hypnotist brought Katha, Rupert, and Jessica out of their trances. They returned to their seats to be greeted by high fives and good-natured ribbing. Tommy, however, remained a chicken. Jax waited for Romano to restore the last subject, but it didn't happen. There was too much excitement and a scared rooster running like mad from an invisible axe-wielding farmer. The crowd was on its feet, howling encouragement and laughing uproariously. "Faster! He's right behind you!" "No, slow down. I want to watch him chop off your head." It had its amusing side. Even Jax had to admit that. But there was nothing funny about Tommy's reaction. He seemed to be in genuine fear for his life, weeping in terror, clucking, turning into sobbing. Enraged, Jack stepped to the footlights and glared at Romallo. "Hey!" The hypnotist glanced down at him. "Listen, mister, you've got to cut this." Before he could finish his sentence, he was slammed by another vision. Himself on the edge of the stage, seen from a high angle. It was sudden and so vivid that he forgot for a moment what he was saying and why, but then out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of Tommy and blurted to Romallo, "You try the chicken routine and see how you like it." With a loud squawk, Romallo went hopping across the stage in a near-perfect impersonation of Tommy. It put the crowd over the edge. The students abandoned their seats and rushed up front like the wild revelers in the first few rows of a rock concert. The teachers struggled to restrain their charges, but restraint was impossible. Total chaos ensued. It got so loud and rowdy that Tommy snapped out of his trance and looked around bewildered. He grinned triumphantly at Jack. "See? I told you he couldn't hypnotize me." That was when he noticed Romallo strutting and crowing. "Whoa, get a load of that goofy guy." To the 7th graders, it was the best field trip in a long time. If this really was an example of 1920s, they were all for it. Only the amazing Romallo didn't seem to be stopping. As the laughs died down to be replaced by an uncomfortable murmur, he was still waddling and clucking and flapping. The stagehands came out with a hook, but that seemed to terrify him, and he scrambled away from them. It finally took 2 large men who were not in the 20s clothing to corner him and wrestle him, kicking and clucking into the wings. There was a juggler and a contortionist still to come, but no one could settle the audience after this performance, especially since the squawking could still be heard from the backstage. "Do you think he's part of the act?" Jessica asked nervously. "He isn't even out here anymore." "He's nuts," Rupert concluded. "Either that, or he hypnotized himself when he hypnotized Tommy," added Kathia. "Don't be stupid," Tommy scoffed. "He never hypnotized me." You did everything but lay eggs, she shot back. Tommy looked at Jax for backup, but he only got a sad nod. But Jax was preoccupied. Another vision, closely followed by another explosion of crazy behavior like the eye doctor and the psychiatrist. Of course, there was always the possibility that Romallo was just mimicking Tommy as part of his act. It certainly turned his performance into a showstopper. But wasn't it time to dial back the poultry imitation? These incidents had started off so rare that at first it had been easy for Jax to push them out of his mind. But now they were happening every week, practically every day. Something was very wrong. But what? It took a bucket of ice water to wake up the amazing Romallo. Shivering and sputtering, he emerged from his trance to find himself flanked by the theater's two burly security men who were holding him tighter than seemingly necessary. "Welcome back," said the larger one, Joe. "Colonel Sanders called. We told him you're not interested." "Do you remember who you are?" asked Frank, the partner. "I'm the amazing Romallo," said the hypnotist, outraged. His real name was Ray Finkelmeyer, but only the accountant who wrote his checks knew that. He rushed back to his dressing room and dug out his cell phone. What to say? How to explain it? How would he begin to describe the remarkable phenomenon he'd just experienced? With trembling fingers, he dialed the number. "It's me," he said into the phone. "Something just happened. I've never felt a stronger power." So, Jax had another vision of himself. It seems to me like it was from the Romallo's point of view. And when he said what he said to him, it made Romallo do something. So maybe we're getting some hints on what Jax is actually doing and saying and feeling. Boys and girls, we are halfway through April. It's been a month since we've been in school. And I miss you guys terribly. And I hope that you guys are paying attention to what schoolwork you have and trying to do your best work. Remember, Typing Club is online through your Clever accounts. I can still check and see who's logging in. It's definitely something worth trying to do for fun. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to do fourth quarter lessons the way we want to do. So practice your typing if you have the opportunity so that you're better prepared for next year. Okay? All right, boys and girls. I love you guys. I miss you guys. And I can't wait to see you, hopefully sooner rather than later. Bye, guys. See you for our next chapter, Chapter 6.